Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So my name is Jonathan Timon. I'm with Internet2, and I was asked to talk a little about the Internet2 collaboration programs. And I also want to give the first report, public report on what is called the Real-Time Communications Advisory Group, and get as much feedback on a little bit of that as I can, so that before it goes really public in December, we can beat it up a bit. And I know that a couple of people in this very room are on the Real-Time Communications Advisory Group panel, so they should be ready to field your questions for me. Let the heckling begin, Ivan. Okay, so how many of you are in education? And how many aren't? Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that the motivation for collaboration in education is that no single university can afford all of the great minds in the world. And so they wind up distributed all over the country and all over the world. And great minds want to get together and create great thoughts. And that is, in fact, what collaboration is all about. And my thesis is, let's keep that in mind. I'm an applications guy. So let's keep in mind that content matters. And one of the things that looking at collaboration research has revealed to me is that this second statement, discoveries are made in teams, really seems to be true, and I think it was borne out in the talks that I've heard here as well. There are discoveries made that would never be made if you had single people in isolation. I would venture to say that because of the nature of universities, which is a knowledge industry, the creation of knowledge and the essential mission to achieve intellectual discoveries means that collaboration is the heart and soul of the university, which really raises the bar for those of us trying to support it in a ever increasingly global world, global universe. So Internet2, I'll give a little background on Internet2 and how some of the collaborations that are actually being undertaken on Internet2. So there's our mission. We're trying to live a couple of years, 3 to 5 years out in the future. That's proving harder to do now than before because the commodity internet has actually begun to come of age. We are, I think, succeeding. And one of the things that I'd like to emphasize is that Internet2 is not just fiber in the ground and a bunch of leases. It's the people, like yourselves, who we bring together to collaborate, to have those great ideas, and to create the next internet and the next internet applications. Here's a bit of our constituencies: hundreds of universities, lots of corporations, affiliates like libraries and so forth. And I included this slide to give a visual of the fact that there are not only infrastructure corporations that are members, there are also Manhattan School of Music, Cleveland Museum of Art. There also are content providers. We're definitely globally connected by peering to 47 or so other R&E networks. Currently, and this is rapidly becoming dated because it's about to be changed from Abilene to NewNet, but currently we run this backbone at 10 gigs As of Q1 '07, we'll be moving from Quest infrastructure to level 3, and NewNet will have the capability of 100 gigs. Let's don't let that happen. That would screw everything up. No backups. So the footprint will be more or less the same. I mean, that's where fiber runs. But it will be much more robust, much more interesting. So what are the drivers for what we bring to the table, which is essentially unlimited bandwidth? Because we try to make the pipes big enough to the universities, or to the RONs rather, that then pass that large bandwidth supply to the universities directly. What drives the use of that bandwidth, and what drives rich collaboration technologies? Big science is the easiest answer. Biggest science I know of is astronomy. And you put your satellite dishes as far from each other as you can, and as high up in the mountains as you can to get away from light, and then you network them so that you can triangulate and so forth. You also keep your people out of the mountains by having them networked to the equipment. So there's a sub-theme, is that equipment connections matter more and more in real-time applications. So I've tried to sort these together in such a way as to commingle the real-time communications, human to human, and device control, because we find that they actually do merge. Earthquake research, if you have any questions about earthquakes, ask Eric Hoffer. He will tell you. He can, in fact, thank you, Eric, for elements of this slide. Same problem is in play here. You've got people distributed all over the world, but you also have hundreds or even thousands of sensors that you need to coordinate. You need to gather all that information at some single supercomputing site, and that means a lot of data moving very fast. Well, a lot by current standards. We're assured that it will grow. Is that correct, Eric?
Sure.
He nods, says sure. That's for the record. Okay. High energy particle physics. I always like to think of the fact that any one of us can sit at our desk on campus and control an elementary particle experiment at CERN. It's one of my fantasies to be able to do that. So what this slide doesn't say is that you may very well have up to 100 or more PIs for a single collision, for a single experiment. And they all want the data, or some subset of the data, and they want that really fast. Potentially, they would like that data quickly enough to alter the experiment, or do it again, or have a real-time input into what happens with the experiment. Medicine, going from elementary particles to the cellular level, is going to be one of the huge drivers. It already is. We see that in the telepresence field everywhere. Everybody thinks that there's a huge amount of money in telemedicine, and so there's a lot of interest and attraction to the field of medicine and healthcare. It also seems to be running a little behind in terms of adoption. Bob spoke to that yesterday and confirms that. So, but certain things like MRIs are getting finer and finer grained to the point, and you want this, by the way, you want that brain cancer to be found when it's really small as it possibly could be. And that's happening, but look at this little chart. I think this is actually fun. The weeks really, you have to do your own translation to figure that's about 12 years at home if you want to, or you can go up to campus and get it in now much less than 11 seconds. So telemammography is a good example of actions that are taking place today that are really and truly saving lives over the internet. Performance events is, for me, more fun. Some of the arts were brought up yesterday, but people like Michael Tilson Thomas. How many of you own albums from Michael Tilson Thomas? Right. No, you don't really. Sharon, you were just trying to be a good sport. Okay. Well, I have now heard of MTT over and over and over again. But to those who know him, he's really important, right? He's a really big deal. He's a big name. And so he's really and truly instructing others who are just, who think he's a demigod. He's a big deal, and he's able to communicate with students remotely and show them how to conduct or conduct them remotely. And what I learned by going to the workshop live is that that guy's ears and brain are so finely tuned that latency, which we all talk about in the video conferencing world ad nauseum, latency is not as big an issue for him as sonic interference. Any form of echo, or if you're using echo cancellation, you're changing the sound in the signal. And I saw him throw a mild tantrum because the sound guy was using echo cancellation, and he made the sound guy stop. He could deal with the echo because he could filter it out, but he couldn't deal with having actual signal removed from the... Yeah, I'm getting another nod from a musician. You get it. I didn't get it. The other thing I didn't get before I went down there and saw it is why is video and high-resolution video important to musicians? Why isn't it all about sound? Why don't they just have great sound and still photos or something? Well, I saw that in master classes, a student plays, and then the master starts talking about their musculature. You're tensing your jaw. The violins, and it's remarkable. They're picking up on the visual cues real time. I didn't know that. I'm not a musician, and I never would have guessed that. So that was fascinating. So high resolution is not just nice for these guys. It's critical, and it's got to be. And latency, of course, is a huge factor. On the latency thing with MTT, though, I came to realize he is all the time dealing with echo, because from where he stands as a conductor, everybody's coming from different parts of the orchestra. And there's bouncing off the walls, and he's doing that consciously all the time. He's hearing all of that, which is an experience I can only intellectually understand. So another big name is Pinchas Zuckerman. Just this photo, they're actually playing together. He's good enough to be able to shift in time that 120 or 150 milliseconds. It's amazing. But so people will use specialized people will use this specialized technology in specialized ways. Dancers are also of that ilk. They can shift their bodies, they can do what they are told, they can delay, they know about space and time. And watching them work with others remotely is another of those remarkable experiences. The humanities don't really use as much in the way of big bandwidth. But more and more, the problem is occurring that dissertations are non-traditional. So what if you make a game, a simulation, as a dissertation? It's a perfectly legitimate thing to do now. And you turn it in, but you not only turn it in, but you have to talk to your advisors throughout the whole process. And that's anywhere from 2 to 10 years of getting this stuff worked out with a half dozen people. And I used to think in the old days before there was the internet that if you got 5 full professors in a room to concentrate on something that you have written, you are automatically given a PhD. Because it's that hard to get these professors in one single place. More and more you're finding that these defenses are being done with somebody not co-located with you, so virtually co-located. Those are a couple of really important aspects that we have to address. So there are not only communities, specialized communities that are using high bandwidth and high quality collaboration tools, but what I've noticed, and I think this is important, is that communities gather around events. Look at what we've done. Todd and the Microsoft people put together an event to get us together, and then, as we were told in the opening talk, then let us go. Let us think up something, right? Just put them together and see what happens. And that's largely, I think, what collaboration, that's the essence of collaboration. And all the time, I'm supposed to put people together and then see what happens. Hopefully you put the right people together. So more and more of these events are taking place with remote participants. Some of them are exclusively remote. The mega conference happened yesterday. How many of you have heard of the mega conference? I'm guessing that the rest of you have not. So, a guy named Bob Dixon, 8 years ago, a little more than 8 years ago, said, let's have a video conference. Now, think yourself back 8 years ago in the technology of video conferencing. He said, let's have a video conference and invite everybody in the world. And of course, everybody else around the table, which was about 15 people, said, absolutely impossible. You can't do that. That will not work. Therefore, he had to do it, and he did. So the first time they got about 50 people, and it grew and grew and grew until last year. I don't know the stats for yesterday yet, but last year there were 425 sites, approximately 7,500 different people who connected to the mega conference. And this is a real conference. I mean, people give little talks. You got to keep it short, but give little talks, and then everybody gets to check in. So everybody speaks at one point or another. They get their minute of fame. So over 15 years, you collect your whole 15 minutes. So it's a lot of work. In the architecture of H323, which is MCU based, this is not easy. You wind up with, we put together for this year about 700 possible ports that we know of, and then anybody can cascade beyond that. So it's hard to find out how many people actually participate. That's data you have to get from humans. I did find out yesterday that the OSU president, Holbrook, came and she was going to give her little 1 minute, hi, I'm the president of OSU and I think that the mega conference is a great thing. But she was so fascinated by the other people who were there and by the questions that started coming to her and the interactions, she canceled 2 other meetings and just stayed. You know, I mean, presidents can do what they want, but usually you don't get them for very long. And that's just an example of how even people at that level are able to discover this human event, the excitement of the human event. So there have been spin-offs, Mega Conference Junior, which is a K-20, K-12 event, and is actually much, much more fun than Mega Conference because it's kids, and kids all around the world, and they do not have the filters that we have. At least some of us have. So so now it's about giga-conference. You know, mega-conference is happening, and that goes. It's a lot of work, but hey, did it, you know? I mean, what do you want to do? Just keep growing it until you finally get in the Guinness Book of World Records? There isn't a category for biggest video conference yet. But giga-conference takes on the HD aspect and has pretty much the same rules. But do you know how these HD H323 units interoperate? Well, neither do we. But on December 5th, we're going to find out. I mean, there will be a lot of work to try and get these things to connect to the MCUs that claim they can do it. And Tandberg does not interpret HD the same way life-size does. I know this. I know this. Polycom thinks that they will have an HD unit that works by that date. They're hoping to be there. So Collaboranza 2, our second instance of a workshop wherein we take a handful of the collaboration tool suites that you're all becoming very familiar with. There are, on the Commons website, we've got a chart of a couple hundred different collaboration tool suites. This is about 5 of them that we, including Conference XP, and what we do is try and get everybody who comes to that workshop to really understand those diverse tools so that when they walk out, they have a better grasp of a variety of them and can make their decisions, because what we're finding is that people on campuses are making decisions that really commit them for years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the RTC world. So this thing that I am supposed to manage, the Internet2 Commons, the mission is simply to promote and facilitate remote collaboration over IP. And what I have learned over the years is, Todd said a lot of this before, keep it simple. Keep it easy. If you want a whole lot of people to use it, it's got to be really, 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 really easy. Dumb it down. Reliable, I didn't even used to have on a slide like this, because it was just assumed. People will never say it's got to be reliable. But boy, if it doesn't work, it's not thought of as easy. I agree that it's got to be scalable. That's not always the case. Some tools are going to be very specialized. In our case, we were challenged to make it sustainable. We don't have to make money, but we have to try not to lose it as fast as we always seem to want to.
So if you'll go back,
Yep.
what we typically say for there is easy, reliable, scalable, sustainable, pick 3,
Oh, really? You have these two, these same 4?
roughly.
Well, he's right. They are right. So his point is you only get to pick 3 of those 4. But it's nice to have the confirmation that you use the same 4. So we do run a service to try and make it easier for some people to get on the video conferencing wagon. It's a low threshold to participate, so we try and make accessible the latest, greatest hardware and a whole body of expertise to people. We also run trainings, and it surprised me that the online trainings that it took us 6 years to figure out we might be able to do are more popular than the live trainings ever were. We fill them in a matter of days every time, and could do them as often as we wanted. People also like to be certified. I don't know what to make of that, but they do. So we also run a number of servers and pound the bully pulpit for these collaboration tools, and these are going to be the ones in the Collaboranza. So some of the factors in choosing a proper video conferencing format: obviously cost, latency, bandwidth demands. I have DVTS highlighted here because I am fascinated by it. I am a believer in it. I think that it's maybe got a little more hype than it needs right now, but it's going to be a very inexpensive medium, and because everybody's got their little home movie camera. I would love to see that able to feed access grid, everything, but we'll see. H323 is of course where the Commons mainly lives, because that's what's deployed. And it's not going to go away very fast. I was speaking with Eric before we started, and unfortunately, more of my time has been spent on ISDN the last 3 months than you would believe. And I'm getting killed in terms of money because we're trying to support these ISDN links into other video conferences. Right now, it's a hybrid world, not of H323 and SIP like I thought, and I've been telling everybody it was going to be this year, for the last 2 years. No, it's more IP and ISDN than ever before. So I guess what I'm learning from that is that we're going to have H323 for quite a long time. So compatibility with that, interoperability with that is, I think, a good thing. I'm about to shift to a specific collaboration that yielded a report on real-time communications, which is a group that tried to make recommendations, hard and fast recommendations for all the universities to adopt so that real-time communications technologies would work and be interoperable. I see Jason nodding. That's a hard thing to do. And it's been 18 months of, can we say that? I mean, it's one thing to get sort of a loose consensus and start talking the same language and so forth, and it's another to say, can I really tell my CIO that that's what we must do? So there were whole weeks of discussion about, can we use the word must, should, may? And those are defined at the head of the document. So before I shift into that, does anybody have any comments on the first part, the applications part? Feel free. Mike.
What did you mean by H323 and then in brackets HD?
Oh, H323 is now, the H323 has been changing as fast as any other technology. Very, very fast. It's been trying to get H239 implemented so you can exchange slides, have dual monitor support and all that. 460, firewall traversal stuff, all that. All the problems they've been going at them with, but they've been kind of in the standards wars, and that takes years, not months. And then everybody implements them differently, and so you've got the interoperability challenges. And HD for H323 is this 2 to 4 megabits interpreted differently. That's what the GigaConference is going to do. It's going to try and mash these things together. So now there are MCUs that claim to be able to handle HD, which is 720i, I believe, for the most part. Some is 720p. Tandberg, I believe, they don't talk about this openly, is 480p.
Yes, so 480p is not HD, and neither is 720i. So I'm just curious because
exactly.
H.264 is the HD codec spec, not H.323. So I just was wondering where that...
H.264 is the video spec that is now reigning in the world of H.323. H.323 is just the handshake.
Right.
So,
right. But that's just confusing. I don't get it. Do you have any background information on that somewhere that I could look at?
They really aren't.
Because the life-size product uses H.264, so
Yeah.
does Cisco.
Yeah.
It's a published standard for doing low bit rate, high definition, as is VC1. It's
Right.
all scalable in the same range. So, anyway, if anybody has any, I'd like to see it.
So you would like to see how they're applying H.264 to...
No, H.323 HD, like you've had it
Yeah.
written up there. Where'd that come from, and what is that? Is what I want.
It basically came, I'll let Bob answer in a minute, but that phraseology basically came from Lifesize, who tried to identify themselves in a distinguishing way from all predecessors.
They're just making this up.
Not only did they make it up, but they...
Okay.
Yes. So what is HD? That's been, what is HD? Now you dial your resolution. And that's why we're doing this gigaconference. I mean, we're going to crush these things together and see, okay, does this MCU even talk to these others?
Yeah, so
Right.
HD as a resolution chart has been published for some time. There is, you know, it's not. I mean, you can play around with it. You can change parts of it, but then it's something different.
Right. You can. So that's what they linguistically.
It's what you get out of a DVD player running progressive scan. You know, that's not.
It's important to remember that H.323, the actual definition for H.323, it's really a bucket that you can dump anything into. And I think, Mike, these H.323 vendors, when they use HD, what they're talking about is they're going to give you letterbox size video that looks better than the H.263 video.
So this is my caution, because it's really easy for people like Lifesize or Cisco or somebody else to tell you what you're getting is high definition, and that's not really what you're getting. So when you look at a microphone.
I'll hold it.
Okay. So when you even when you go into a store and you want to buy something, you want to buy a display, or you're looking at something on a screen, and so many people believe that if the picture is 16 by 9, it's got to be high definition when it really isn't. Or, you know, if somebody like Lifesize says this is high definition, what is it? What's the resolution of the camera? What codec are you using? What can the display do? You know, so I kind of object to.
You're a video engineer.
Well,
You should object.
companies like I should have just it's my job, but I mean for companies like this to reinvent something and tell you this is what it is when it isn't really that. As long as you understand what you're buying, it's okay, but it's not all that straightforward.
Mike, of course, is absolutely right, but you know, it's salesmanship.
Yeah.
They're selling something. And the first I ever heard of it actually was years ago. Vcon was using high definition, and they were talking about 4CIF at 15 frames a second, I think. So it's, you know, but it is better than CIF. It's 9.5 CIF is what they're doing. So for Lifesize. And Lifesize actually is illegal in terms of H.323 also, as Bob well knows. It doesn't support 261 video. And that's one of the few things that is required by H.323. Okay, so now I was told I should run over, and I have. So I'm going to zip through this part because it's really dry and dull, but the list of people is the most interesting part. The challenge, I think, is interesting. But so this is how the executive summary begins. Real-time communications is a developing set of converged applications that includes VoIP, video conferencing, IM, unified messaging, presence, data collab tools. So that I used to think was kind of the holy grail. Get them all together in a single tool. I'm not convinced that they need to be in a single tool suite. We immediately added that you have to keep in mind that machine communications devices are going to be every bit as important as humans. So it's not just voice and text and so forth. You've got to think device control as well. So there actually is a roadmap for what campuses should do over the years. I'm not going to go through this, but try to imagine the task that this group faced in making hard recommendations for 207 universities in terms of what their infrastructure should be like. These are the items that were identified early on and then added to that we had to tackle. I was just the flywheel, so thank goodness. But these guys argued about this stuff. Ivan left the room. He was, by the way, on the group. His name was there. So I'm not going to do these. They were just examples of some of the statements. that wound up being made. Multipoint conferencing is actually very ordinary language, so I'm going to leave that up for a minute. Somebody might find this objectionable, but it seems pretty easy, straightforward.
I'm sorry, go back.
Whoops, yep. I thought I'd read it twice. Okay.
So I would...
I was hoping Todd would object to this, actually.
I guess I do a little bit. So campuses should also expect that this functionality is devolving to the endpoint. Campuses should also expect that this functionality is devolving to the endpoint, which IP phones and video phones, including capability internally for small conferencing applications. So what I think we're actually seeing is it's not devolving to the endpoints, it's actually devolving to the cloud. So if I take a look at, for instance, I'm only passingly familiar right now with Microsoft's own IP phone deployment, but basically our IP phones are dumb devices, and there are servers or cloud there that provide all of the voice messaging, call forwarding, and other capabilities. So it's actually the exact opposite of that. We're centralizing all the intelligence in a cloud or a server cluster, and the phones are becoming effectively dumb devices into that. So,
Anybody else? There's more to this. I don't think that anything hinges on that statement, except that there are certainly, I think that what they were thinking is that people are using their laptops for just about everything. And you're going to get some people who are going to be doing VoIP from any sort of little device. And the devices are getting pretty smart. Go ahead.
I think we've had a slightly different experience from what Todd mentioned. We've had, previously with SIP.edu and now with the IP rollout at Michigan, we're using Cisco phones, and they get their configuration from a server, but they do have varied capability depending on what phone you were allotted. So our phones at least aren't completely dumb devices. A lot of the capabilities are hardwired, or are sort of limitations are dictated by what handset you were given. So, I would be interested.
Let's talk about the advanced service. Keep the microphone there. That's fine. I want to ask him a follow-up to that. But for advanced services like voicemail, that's not coming down to your phone. That's in the cloud. Call forwarding control, that's in the cloud. It has to, by definition, be in the cloud. Conferencing, that's not actually done at the phone. That's actually done at the cloud. So I would agree that there are some very capable IP phones, but at the end of the day, the advanced stuff isn't that really going to, by definition, have to happen in the cloud? Certainly anything that you're looking at for multi-party, okay, the phone's out of it now. It's all going to be controlled and managed at the cloud. So I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying, for purposes of this conversation, which is all about multi-party, then the phone becomes irrelevant and everything happens at the cloud.
Sure.
So.
Was that a question, Todd?
I guess sort of.
No, we're in agreement as far as that's concerned. I basically wanted to know what, how things are run for you guys as opposed to for us.
My phone is very capable, the IP phone that I have. But the thing that was interesting to me for this conversation, I guess I was focusing more on this particular example, which was all the multi-party stuff. Thank you.
Okay. So you can imagine the conversations and arguments that went on for 18 months and ultimately wound up with a checklist. So here's where I actually thought that Microsoft might find this interesting, that a checklist for the campuses to go through and say, yes, we're in compliance with the recommendations on this, and this. What a strange thing to do, but how else are you going to do it? And I think it's pretty gutsy to have gotten that far. My question to all of you is, as you try to develop a tool suite, a collaboration tool suite, is it helpful to have such a tool as a checklist of compliance that the universities have adopted? so that they all will have a minimal, at least as a minimum, a comparable architecture on their campuses. That's the hope. Is that a useful thing for developers of collaboration tools? Yes, Gino.
I just want to offer a thought about the idea of the checklist. From where I'm coming, we've got a group of students who hopefully someday will have managerial positions in one or another kind of business. And the idea of them having good tools is very important, but I think it's just as important for them to understand that the concept of collaboration is something that it really is a person side or a warmware side. The technology enables and supports it, but the people have to be willing to in fact enter in that collaboration. And I've been kind of surprised recently where a lot of students are complaining when we have them work in team environments, because they say we do things better as an individual. And to me, that's a equally high barrier as any technology barrier.
I certainly am in the choir on that one. That a challenge that may or may not be for this group is the social one. And I think that you know, that's one of your jobs is to say, I don't care if you like working alone or not, you're working in a team because you will for the rest of your life. And you have to do it well. You have to learn to do it well. Eric.
Another important challenge is, I think, the vision still between telephony-oriented facilitators and internet-oriented facilitators. I think SIP.edu is a great example of extending functionality towards the end user, but it's still deployed as a separate thing next to a PBX or IP telephony. So even on campuses, I think there has to be some evolving thoughts on integrating multimedia services. And for European environments, it's very important to hook up all these VoIP islands. And that's not something that telcos are going to do because they're telephony oriented either. So this checklist is definitely useful in trying to get them to think about other media except for voice as well.
Thank you. Anybody else follow up on that? Okay. Final closing image. I went back to a 1955 National Geographic and just was glancing through to see where we were 50 years ago. And you know, I don't know if I'm proud or ashamed of the fact that I've watched that blonde television over there with that funny shape, and I've actually had I've used professionally one of these calculators with the printout, and it was just magical to have the printout. It was really something. And now I think data and video have converged. I think we can be proud of that. I think it's worth sitting back and patting ourselves on the back because people like yourselves have actually made that merger happen. So here's my closing remark. I'm not certain that stereo is the first feature to be added to Conference XP. It's been too cool too long. So keep in mind your point that it's the human relationships, so far as I'm concerned, that needs to be the North Star in terms of development of features for Conference XP and all other collaboration tools. So I think you have to keep that in the back of your mind all the time, not just this would be really cool, but will it really help bond the relationships that are critical to the Collaboration Act? And that's all I have to say. Final comments from anybody? Yes.
I had to step out for a minute, so I didn't see a little chunk of what you said, but it seems to me that one of the emerging pieces that even we on the RTC group haven't addressed, which is showing up as a significant both revenue
issue. It's interesting for companies, but it's also something we have to deal with on campuses, are these social network solutions like Facebook, MySpace. They're actually things like IM was 5 years ago when we said, what is online text communication going to look like? Well, this IM thing's going to go away, no doubt, right? And these social networking sites are just coming up on the horizon as the sort of emerging technology. Gino talked about, our kids are now fully wired but really don't know necessarily about the technology as well as they think they do. And part of that's coming from the social networking where they're computer-mediated social activities are becoming a really interesting sort of intersection of things, technologies, and people that we have to start investing in understanding more deeply. It's not a technology problem now. It's a social problem, and we have to really address some of those issues.
Thank you. I totally agree. And I'm handicapped by the fact that I don't have a 10-year-old child, but I do have a 12-year-old niece, and she assures me that email is so passé. She doesn't do it anymore at all. If somebody wants to get a hold of her, they leave a note on her MySpace. Simple as that.
I just wanted to add one additional comment, and this is very biased because it comes from my class. I think that the students who understand that they need the interaction, the collaboration, they get it very quickly. The small percentage who don't, no matter what you try to say to them, they still argue that they don't need it. So a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is going to be good for a vast majority of people, but there's a small group. I don't really know how to reach that small group, but there's a small group that are not going to pick it up.
There's a limit. You can't dance for the few. You've got to essentially, I'm just thinking. But I also think the other part that you're making is about telling the universities. I've seen too often administrators want to settle for the cheap rather than to take the future look. And I think that this advantage of what I see you putting forth here is something that some of us who push our administrations can use it as a, hey, this is where you got to go if you're not going to be left out. And I think that's useful.
Okay, great. That's the idea. Final comments from anyone? Todd, I failed to fill an hour, but...
You did fine. Thank you.